Niger. Recently, we have seen Niger in news. Why is it in news? Recently, Niger's a military coup has taken control, ousting democratically elected President Mr. Mohamed Bazoum. Military coup General Abdul Rahman Tichani, who is the leader of the group, declared himself the head of the state. The Sahel region, home to Niger, has witnessed political instability and ethnic tensions. Niger is a landlocked country located in the West Africa, is the largest country in the West Africa and roughly twice the size of France. Niger is one of the world's poorest countries and faces challenges related to poverty, food security and underdevelopment. Niger has significant natural resources including gold mining reserves and significant share of global uranium production. The economy is largely agrarian with a focus on subsistence farming and livestock. What is political crisis in Niger? It was a French colony until 1960. French language is official language of Niger. Since independence, the country have lived under 5 constitutions and 3 periods of military rule. After the military coup in 2010, Niger became a multi-party state. The country experienced a series of military coups and political instability in the decades following independence. Niger is a former French colony, and the coup has led to a wave of anti France and pro Russian sentiment in the country, similar to that experienced by neighbors Mali and Burkina Faso, which have both turned towards Moscow since their own coups. This coup, which ousted the democratically elected president and ushered in a military coup. The rationale behind the military takeover is continued worsen of the security situation and poor economic and social governance in the country. Military coup general told that the nation would be run by a newly formed military body, the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland. This is the seventh coup in the Western and Central Africa since 2020, including two each witnessed by Niger's neighbors Burkina Faso and Mali. What was the global reaction? The 15 member states, Western African Regional Body ECOWAS, Economic Community of Western African States, have imposed sanctions and threatened to use force if the coup leaders do not reinstate the president. African Union demanded the country's military return and restored constitutional authority. European Union announced the suspension of security and funding cooperation with Niger, declaring that it would not recognize the military coup. France, the country's former colonial power, demanded for president release and a return to a constitutional order. The United States also formally declared the Niger's democratically elected president was removed in a military coup, which results in officially suspending assistance to Niger. What have been the reasons for the rising number of military takeovers in Africa and Western Africa in particular? What was the nature of France's security involvement in Africa? And why is there a strong anti-French sentiment in the region? French President Emmanuel Macron announced the end of the decade-long Operation Barkhane in Africa. French operation had two objectives in the Sahel. First, to liberate Mali from the insurgency in the north, and second, to see through counter-terrorism operations in West Africa, including the neutralization of key terrorists. What is Operation Barkhane? France began its military operations in Sahel in 2013. Titled Operation Sarwal, it was limited to targeting Islamic extremists linked to Al Qaeda who took control of northern Mali. However, in 2014, the mission was renamed Operation Barkhane and was aimed at counterterrorism. The objective was to assist local armed forces to prevent the resurgence of non-state armed groups across the Sahel region. Around 4,500 French personnel were deployed with the local joint counterterrorism force. Has France achieved its objectives? In its major success, France regained Mali's northern regions from the extremists in 2014 through Operation Serval. In 2020, key leaders of Al Qaeda were killed in French led operations. The 2014 success led to the inception of Operation Barkhane aimed at counter-terrorism in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mauritania and Chad. However, Operation Barkhane saw a series of failures. First, the region, despite the operation, witnessed the growth of new groups affiliated to terrorist organizations, including the Islamic State. Second, the failure of the operation led to a humanitarian crisis. Third, Operation Barkhane's unfulfilled objective to resolve the region's insurgencies sparked an increase in civilian support to the military and has contributed to the subsequent political uncertainties in the Sahel. Why did France pull out its forces? First, France's relations with the military rulers grew hostile after a series of coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. Relations between France and Mali soured after the latter expelled the French ambassador when he disagreed with the junta's decision to remain in power until 2025. In addition, France was contemptuous about Malian authorities negotiating a peace deal with insurgent groups. Secondly, Operation Barkhane was widely perceived as a failure. Anti-French sentiments and questions over France's intentions flared up, with a further demand for France's withdrawal from the region. Over the past decade, US troops have trained Nigerian forces in counter-terrorism and operated two military bases, including one that conducted drone missions against rebel fighters affiliated with ISIS and Al Qaeda. There are now about 1,000 US Defense Department personnel in Niger. For France and US, Niger is a key security partner in fighting Islamist militancy in the Sahel and Gulf of Guinea. For Europe, Niger has been a bulwark to control African migration flows as well as an important source of uranium. Both the US and France operate military bases in Niger as a part of operations to disrupt jihadist groups operating in the wider region. Niger became the main base for French troops after they were told to leave Mali following a coup there. Niger nuclear reserves. How the coup can throw Europe into a deep energy crisis. What is a nuclear angle? French influence over its former colonies has waned in West Africa in recent years. Its forces have been kicked out of neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso since coups in those countries, reducing its role in a region wide fight against deadly Islamist insurgencies. The immediate attention goes to the investments the French and the European Union have made to equip Niger's military to fight jihadist violence in the region. Uranium ban in Niger can spark protest and energy crisis in France and the European Union. Niger, with the world's seventh largest uranium deposits, according to the World Nuclear Association, exports uranium to France and the European Union. France relies on 50% of Niger's uranium for 70% of its nuclear power. Around 24% of Niger's uranium was exported to other European Union countries, contributing to one fourth of their electricity. In 2019 only, about 2,982 tons of uranium was produced by the two operating mines of the country. The current uranium production occurs from the open pit operations of Somer, which is 63% owned by French company Orano and 36% owned by Niger state-owned company. According to the data from the World Bank, uranium is Niger's second largest export in monetary terms after gold. With the eruption of a coup in Niamey, leading to the cessation of uranium supply to France, added with a degree of anti-France sentiment in the country due to its contested history of colonial exploits in the region, has sent shockwaves both in Paris and Brussels. Thousands of people were seen demonstrating in front of the French embassy in Niamey, where the crowds in front of the French embassy were reportedly shouting "Long live Putin" and "Down with France" slogans. It said that Paris recognized only Belgium as a legitimate authority in the West African country and focused on protecting its own interest in the country. The presence of uranium deposits in Niger and the French dependence on the same for its energy needs further complicates the situation in the poverty-stricken but resource-rich Niger. While the French and the European Union have invested in previous years to boost Niger's military capabilities, the optics of anti-French demonstrations in Niamey do not direct to the success of those efforts. The European Union has energy crisis in the Russia-Ukrainian war, and now after this uranium ban, the energy crisis in France, European Union would be serious. The coup in Niger could do what Moscow's imposition of war in Ukraine could not. It can threaten two-thirds of the energy supply in France and one-fourth of the energy supply in European Union. Finally, France and other Western unions claim that the Wagner Group, a privately military company close to the Kremlin, is playing a major role in fueling the insurgency and discrediting French withdrawal. For Africa, the Wagner Group is an alternative that engages with military governments without abiding to human rights and democratic standards. Wagner is believed to have thousands of fighters in countries including the Central African Republic and Mali, where it has business interests but also strengthened Russia's diplomatic and economic relations. The group's fighters have been accused of widespread human rights abuses in several African countries. Despite this, there has been speculation Niger's army has asked Wagner for assistance as the country faces the possibility of military intervention. The president, who is currently being detained, has also spoken of his concerns about Wagner's influence in Africa. Despite reported fears of it happening, Niger has not announced a ban on uranium exports to the European Union. The country did not declare any plans to halt uranium exports. Niger was second largest supplier of natural uranium to the European Union in 2022. China is the second largest investor in Niger after France in the last 2 decades. It has pumped in huge amount in the landlocked West African nations. According to China Ministry of Commerce, the China National Petroleum Corporation has invested $4.6 billion in Niger's oil sector, while the China National Nuclear Corporation has invested $480 million in West Africa. In the hope of protecting the region from instability and strengthening security measures in fight against ISIS, Al Qaeda, and other terrorist groups, China has provided $45 million to support G5 Sahel security and counter-terrorism operations in 2019. France has begun to withdraw its troops from Niger after coup leaders they demanded they end their anti-jihadist deployment. That has left questions over France's security strategy in Africa, but also about growing Chinese and Russia's influence in the region.